Welcome to Grid Talk. My name is Ruby Price, and today we're here to discuss the 2024 Italian Grand Prix. Joining me today, we have Grid Talk's Owain Medford,
Hello.
Tom Horrocks from Monkey Seat,
Hello.
and Phil Mathew from Grip Strip Podcast.
Hello.
Before we get into the episode, we must thank our sponsor for the episode, Bet Online. Bet Online is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything football. Bet Online has every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads to bet on during the games. Think you know your stuff? Get in on our $200,000 mega contest and pick 5 games against the spread every week for your chance at weekly games and a share of $200,000. When the game's over, head on over to our online casino and get in on a game of blackjack or poker, or unwind with one of our over 150 slots games. Head to the website today to get in on the action. Bet online. The game starts here. And be sure to follow us on social media at Grid Talk UK. And if you're feeling extra generous, please consider supporting us on Patreon for exclusive access and behind the scenes content. So after standing on the shoulder of giants, Charles Leclerc has done it again, winning the Italian Grand Prix for Ferrari ahead of Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris. Owain, how did Leclerc manage to get the better of McLaren today?
To be honest with you, he did it right off the start. It was into the second chicane, and he just, I think, with the way that the McLaren sort of seemed to trip each other up, he managed to just slide his car up the inside, and that was that really. He was then, behind Piastri, who had got the best of Norris, through that move, and then through doing that, they just sort of ran their own race and pulled a sort of. It's a strategy that I think worked for them on the day. I don't think the deg was as much as the teams expected on the hards, and also obviously Monza's a track where, to a degree, you can save tires, and they did that. They executed the one stop seemingly perfectly. Managed the pace to give themselves enough of a lead that Piastri couldn't catch up, and from there, it was an easy victory.
Yeah, absolutely. Tom, Ferrari wins at Monza don't come around too often, and Leclerc has managed to do it twice now. To win in Italy in front of the Tifosi, it's more than just a stat.
Yeah, absolutely. He's definitely cementing his position there as the golden child of Ferrari. 5 years, I think it's to the day since he won in 2019 as well. It's always a great thing to see a Ferrari on top of the podium, or even just on the podium in Monza. It's not always as plain sailing as that. They love a Monza special, don't they, Ferrari? No matter how bad they are, apart from 2019, 2020, no matter how bad they are always in with a shout of something at Monza. Just very rarely we see them on the top steps. So Leclerc, obviously, he's going to adore this memory. After a pretty difficult season, it has to be said, he has been performing at the top of his game in the last sort of 5, 6, 7 races, and he's really throwing down the gauntlet there to Lewis Hamilton coming into that team. And I think Lewis is going to not quaking in his boots because he's got no need to fear anyone, but Hamilton is going to have to prove an awful lot when he gets to Ferrari that he's still got the pace that Leclerc is clearly showing, and what he's adding to his game now is that race management, that tire management. What a fantastic display of tire management that he's done today, and he's getting a lot of coaching from the team over the radio, from what I was hearing. And but what a great job they've done, and you've got to say hats off to Ferrari as well, because the strategy, they called it, they took the risk, and they made it work. The clown meme of the Ferrari pit wall, I don't think there's really been any case for that at all this season. There's been the odd questionable decision, but sometimes you've got to make those decisions. So no, it's hats off to Ferrari and Leclerc for a stunning win, fully deserved.
Yeah, absolutely. And Phil, we've got to mention it now. This is the second race win for Leclerc this season that Ferrari have brought circuit-specific updates to, but they are feeling confident that the performance can be carried on afterwards. From what you saw today, might we see more wins from Leclerc this season?
It's entirely possible, Ruby. I do think though that Ferrari, I mean, they made track specific upgrades, as you said, and a lot of these tracks that they're coming up to are more of the medium speed variety and having to have that, middle of the road downforce levels and stuff like that. So, I mean, Ferrari's won 3 races this year. They've been Ferrari in other races as well. they've been on the pace and then they've been totally off of it. So can never count either driver out at Ferrari right now or next year for that matter. But I think it's more to do with the team and the management of the races, which, of course, like Tom said, they did a good job with today. That's not always the case. So if they can do that, and with some of the other things that are going on right now, yeah, sure. But I mean, I think they're also trying to maximize their opportunity to win the Constructors' Championship, which now is actually in play. And with the eight races to go or whatever. So that will be the key, I believe, for Ferrari as we move forward through the rest of the season.
Yeah, only I think 40 points it is now that they're off Red Bull in the constructors, and certainly a topic that's going to be, dominating the talking points really, that both the drivers' championship and the constructors' championship standings and how this race will influence them going forwards. So similarly then, Owain, on to McLaren, and whilst it's papaya rules, it's Oscar Piastri feeling supersonic as he took the lead against his teammate going into the Della Roggia chicane on lap one and never really looked back. Firstly, tell me about Piastri's race, and should he have given the precious P2 to Lando, considering the drivers' championship battle?
I don't think so, really. I think there's a certain amount of, if you're leading away, then I don't think you should necessarily have to slow down to give the position to your teammate, no matter what the situation is. I mean, well, almost no matter what the situation is, I would say. I think Piastri was out there chasing down Charles Leclerc, obviously not quickly enough to get the win, but Lando wasn't. This when we're talking about sort of hypothetical championship fights that, well, fundamentally are still quite far away. Like, he's got to maintain this level of performance through Lando, that is, has to maintain this level of performance, outscoring Max by at least this number of points, preferably more, right to the end. If this was 3 races to go, then absolutely I'd say that, yeah, he has to switch over no matter what's happening. But for the sake of, the team ultimately has to look at what's going on right now, and I think right now it's better to have them both pulling in the same direction, still scoring a hell of a lot of points, getting them within 8, sorry, of Red Bull. But apart from that, I mean, don't hit each other, but race as far as you can. And Piastri was pulling away from Norris. Why should he have to slow down to let him pass for a potential championship fight that's a little bit far away right now?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm of the opinion as well that Oscar Piastri wasn't required to give that position to Lando Norris. But let us know what you think in the comments. Obviously, if you're watching this live, we might have a bit of a chat about it afterwards in the post show after we've gone through the rest of the teams. But Tom, after George Russell let his P3 slide away into turn one, it was very much a recovery drive for the Mercedes Gio as the pair had to claw their way back up the field little by little. A messy weekend for the team who won 3 of the previous races, but best of the rest after Ferrari and McLaren.
Yeah, I'm not even going to acknowledge those puns. I'm just going to skirt over them. But yeah, unlucky one for Russell with that lap one collision with Piastri. He did seem to brake unusually early for that. But I think that was more. I think that McLaren was saying, look after turn one, and after that, all bets are off. And Piastri took that literally. So I think he was protecting protecting Lando into turn one with that early braking maneuver, which fortunately for him hasn't led to a puncture, but did lead to a bit of front wing damage for George Russell, which was very, very compromising his first stint. He did race pretty well back into the fight. Lewis obviously beneficial of that first corner incident. Again, raced pretty well. But then coming to the end of the race, they're 115 behind Ferrari, who have scored very highly today, obviously. Then it doesn't look like they're going to catch them. They're 218 points ahead of Aston Martin. They're not going to be caught by them in any planet. It just seems like a bit of a limp home to 4th place. I mean, you could say that based on current form, they could even be in with a chance of catching Red Bull. I'm not sure they do. But based on this performance, if they can get up there and start winning races again, then they could do. But it's just very inconsistent from Mercedes right now. And we wouldn't have said going into this race that they are slower than Ferrari, but they categorically were the slower. They were the fourth fastest. Well, they were the third fastest car in the race, with George doing a stellar lap in final lap in qualifying to get him back up there into P3, which was actually the reason for his downfall in the end. If he'd have been somewhere else, maybe that wouldn't have happened. But that's where we are. But I think one thing that's going to be disappointing for George Russell in particular, 36 points behind Lewis Hamilton, despite being a 12-4 lead in qualifying and a 9-7 lead in race results, he still finds himself 36 points behind. I do think George has had quite a bit of bad luck, though. But these things even out, and I'd say over the 3 years they've been in this team together, they've kind of had roughly the same amount of luck now. It's where these last few months together, these last 8 races together goes. It's going to be a fascinating end to a partnership, which a lot of people thought was going to be very combustible. And it really hasn't been. There's been a few flashpoints here and there. So Mercedes are not going to be happy with that. I think they would have, with the Red Bulls behind them, I think they would have expected more. I know things were compromised with George, but they couldn't do the one-stop strategy, which was clearly the faster one. Everyone who did a one-stop strategy improved their overall finish position. Everyone who did a 2-stop in the end would have been slightly disappointed, aside from maybe Lewis Hamilton. Everyone else who did a 2-stop really probably should have done better. So a bit bittersweet in some ways for Mercedes.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you say, the two Mercedes drivers during the time together have been very, very close in terms of overall performance throughout those 3 seasons. And I sort of agree with you as well of how this last half of the season is going to go between the two drivers, with Ferrari leaving. Like Ferrari leaving with Lewis Hamilton leaving for Ferrari, it could very much like set a narrative almost for how George Russell will be referred to, after Hamilton's left the team. Ferrari are not leaving Formula One as far as we're aware at this current point, but every time the Concord Agreement comes up, it might be brought up. But Phil, it was an off weekend then for the Red Bull drivers, as both of them failed to impact the top cars. Verstappen only managing a distant 6th, Perez following the Mercedes in 8th. Verstappen will be hoping for a better run of results to come if he wants to achieve his champagne supernova at the end of the season.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really take it seriously that he's in peril in terms of a world championship. I figure he's gonna win that, and he earned that earlier in the year when they were dominant. Once everybody has caught up to them, though, it's been quite interesting to see how he's handled things. And now that they were basically nowhere this whole weekend, I'm curious as to how he will be at Baku here in a couple of weeks' time, which has some similarities, of course, in terms of speed, like I talked about the whole Charles Leclerc thing, but they have an opportunity there. But I mean, this team, the way things have been going, there's more questions about what is to come for them, what is going to happen without Adrian Newey, what is next year going to look like, and the year after that. That's really more of the question. I'm not really concerned with the the guy who drives the 1 car as much as the guy who drives the 11 car and what he's doing, since that's where their real problems lie, is the constructors, since McLaren has 2 strong drivers. You got Ferrari who has 2 strong drivers, and depending on the day, even Mercedes does, and they have that basically, since these cars, like has just been said by Tom, they've been very equal, and you guys have said that. So, I mean, I don't know. And what are they playing for, really? They're basically playing for Andrea Kimi Antonelli's entrance into the team, and he made quite an entrance on Friday. But, in terms of Red Bull, though, it's whatever. They've been so good for so long, it's jarring that they are that far back. But even the best have bad days, so they might just get back and finish 1-2 next race, the way things have been going.
Yeah, every single one of these last 5 or 6 races now, I think it might actually be, I've expected to see Red Bull come back the weekend after and just smash it out of the park. And so far, that's yet to actually happen. But which does feel strange. Like as you said, it feels almost weird to see them so off the pace. Um, and I think as well the impact that that is having on the Constructors' Championship because the two trailing teams, McLaren and Ferrari, have caught right up and are now only a race weekend's worth of points away from taking that top spot. McLaren even closer. So absolutely, like, it's about the team to pull together and perform. And both drivers didn't quite perform at their best this weekend, but it has been a season mostly of one of those drivers not performing at the same level. But speaking of teams with drivers not performing at the same level up until this point, at the very least, Owain, let's take a look at Williams. Making his Formula One debut after the team let Logan Sargent go, Franco Colapinto told F1 to listen up as he made a very nice overtake into turn one, ultimately finishing P12. His teammate Albon inherited P9, but a strong result really for Williams, picking up the first points of the midfield.
I was about to fully have a fight there because I was just like, "Hey, they're doing brilliant." No, Alex Albon, yeah, no, as you say, he picked up the only points available, well, the highest points available if you're in that midfield, really, without retirement from one of those top 8 cars, such as the way that Formula One is now. There's only really 2 to play for, and obviously Albon got them. We've almost come to expect that, particularly with the way the Williams is. But by comparison, I mean, who thought that we'd be seeing, Franco Colapinto? Who thought we'd be seeing that second Williams anywhere near the points at any point this year? Unfortunately, with the greatest respect to Logan Sargent, but he's not been putting in performances that would be anywhere close to that. And Colapinto comes in his first race with Williams and gets a 12th place, which at the end of the season might be quite important when it comes to to dishing out the order and on countback. So I think that's a tremendous race, and to say that he's only, I think, 14 or so seconds back, it's not a huge deficit either. To say that it's his first F1 race, he's got 9 races to show himself, and if he keeps this up, you'd be silly not to try and get him in for a seat for 2025 if one's at all available. But I get the feeling that maybe he won't get to have one, unfortunately, and it's just a great shame because this is looking like a really promising performance.
Yeah, absolutely. And it must be said, this is obviously Monza. It's a relatively simple track for a driver to come in and perform, as Williams have done with 3 of their rookies almost in the last 3 seasons, I think it is. But at the same time, Logan Sargent only managed P13 in the Williams at the Italian Grand Prix last season. So Colapinto's already one-upped him. Colapinto. I'll get there. He's only just come in this weekend. But whilst that wasn't a 5-star name pronunciation, if you enjoy this podcast and think it's worth 5 stars, please take 5 to leave us a 5-star rating on Spotify or a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. And if you're watching along on YouTube, why not give us a like and a subscribe? You might be one of the 72% of people watching who aren't subscribed. So do it and ring that bell to get a notification when we do go live. Because you might miss us if not. But Tom, then let's take a look at the other half of the field. So Kevin Magnussen finished a lofty P10 after serving a 10-second penalty at the end of the race for a sloppy move, punting Pierre Gasly off track, and has also been given 2 additional penalty points from the FIA, taking up to the 12 needed for a race ban. Firstly, who are the drivers that are sort of in contention to fill this slot for Baku? Baku is the next race. And secondly, how was his teammate Hulkenberg half the world away from Magnussen?
Well, Hulkenberg was putting the gravel on lap 1, I believe, was what happened. Might have been by Ricardo, I want to say. It's a long time ago. And also had a screaming child on my lap at the time. So, so it was that was kind of pretty much the end of Hulkenberg's race at that point, a certainly competitive race at that point. So it was all down to good old faithful Kevin Magnussen. He's the guy we need to go through the field and make valid overtakes and not get penalty points. Oh, wait, no, he's not. So once again, he's shown that he's too aggressive, and he's led to the first person ever to receive 12 points within a calendar year since this system came into prominence. Now, the last time we had a race ban was Romain Grosjean for his collision in 2012 in the Belgian Grand Prix, causing a massive pileup, and that was just a straight ban. And then that's when they decided, you know what, this is happening too much. We need to put a system in place. Since that's come in place, we've had a few drivers. We've had Max Verstappen, we've had Lewis Hamilton, we've had Sergio Perez at one point. Pierre Gasly was on 10 points as well. They've all been up at that 10 point. And after that point, we've seen the FIA been lenient and not giving penalties for things that potentially could have been a penalty. And as a result, like we normally see it go out, but Kevin Magnussen racked up 8 points in one race weekend and had 2 penalty points in the previous weekend. He was never going to go until the end of this season, then 4 races into next season, if indeed he had a drive, without getting another couple of points. He should have got another couple of penalty points earlier in the season, but the FIA just decided to be, oh no, that was all right. Oh, we didn't see that. So we've now finally seen them. They've had their hand forced because Kevin Magnussen's obviously forgotten he's on these 10 points. He's been too aggressive. He's caused a collision. He's locked up, gone flying in, and it's fully deserved. Like I'm nothing against Kevin Magnussen. I'm sure he's a lovely person, but he's completely deserved this. He's exactly in the chat. Who is Kevin Magnussen? Oh, who's this Kevin Magnussen guy we keep hearing about? No idea. Yeah, absolutely. But they couldn't ignore it. They had to give him this penalty points. And the fact that they've then had to come out after the document's been published saying he's got the penalty points to clarify, yes, that does mean he's going to get a race ban, just shows how little faith people have that he was even going to get that race ban. We thought maybe there would be another one of these, any doesn't mean all, 12 doesn't mean more than 12 or whatever. You could fully see that kind of thing happening, saying, oh, we'll just give you, you're on a suspended dismissal, that kind of thing. But no, fair play. They have done it. Aya Komatsu has come out and said he has spoken to Ferrari to see about the availability of Oliver Behrman. That's on Ferrari because he's his driver. So if they can get Oliver Behrman in for K-Mag for one race, then fantastic. I mean, I say leave him in for the rest of the season. K-Mag's not being retained, so why bother? But yeah, so we'll wait and see on that one. And we've seen how well Behrman does on narrow, fast tracks that look like they're going to kill you. So hopefully, if he is in for Baku, he'll have a good race. But still focusing on this race, yeah, Hulk, pretty innocent in his one. But the crucial point from Kevin Magnussen does really help the constructors' position. They're 15 points ahead of Alpine. I mean, I'll be talking about Alpine in a bit anyway, so I'll get onto that then. Just 6 points off RB, who aren't really going anywhere at the moment and don't really seem like they've got any chance of getting points. And obviously Ricardo was right there today, but it really doesn't look like they're going to be scoring a huge amount of points. There is a possibility here. Could they get RB as well? And would that be 6th place in the constructors? That would be incredible considering where they were last year. But all that for a team that's about to get a driver banned. That's pretty good going, really. So yeah, well done, Haas.
Well done, Haas, indeed. And well done, the FIA, for actually sticking to the rules. But Phil, Aston Martin, they are chasing a magic pie to provide Alonso with points at this rate. The Spaniard missing out on K-Mag's P10 by the merest of margins, but with his teammate in P15, Aston Martin definitely may be the slowest of the Mercedes-powered cars now.
Yeah, and for all the money that Lawrence is spending, that's a pretty bad investment, I gotta say. But hey, Lance still has a ride. And Fred still gets to go around and be a Formula One driver. So God bless everybody who likes Fred. So, I mean, whatever. I don't know. I guess they're waiting for 2026 and the Honda Power Unit, hoping that it's more like the Red Bull powertrain than the Honda that powered the McLaren back in the day, when Fernando Alonso was there. Right now, they're just nowhere. and they're basically in the same no man's land as Alpine, which doesn't know if they want to exist as a team. I know somebody who wants to exist as a team in Formula One. They actually have a driver that could probably be in Formula One too, but I won't mention them. It's a secret. But in terms of Aston Martin, I don't know what their goal is at this point, other than making up the numbers. Their performances have been really poor and mediocre for a good amount of this season. The fall off that they had from early last year when Fred was basically the only person who could sort of kind of keep up with the one car to where they are now is pretty bad. So I don't know. They were there. That's about all you can say about Aston Martin this weekend.
Yeah, it was a bit of a strange one to see, the team kind of, I say strange, just continue the fact that like they just don't really seem to understand where this car is and where the performance is, to the extent that, Fernando Alonso isn't enjoying driving for the team, but is kind of stuck having signed with them for a while. And, I joked in our chat that Aston Martin waiting for the new Honda engine is, the new waiting for the Audi money for Sauber. But yeah, what can Aston Martin do other than, maybe simulate some of the upgrades that McLaren have put on the car? That might help. But Owain, the Sonoda Monza sad song continues with the driver being forced to retire due to damage caused by Nico Hulkenberg, and with Daniel Ricciardo serving penalties for not even serving penalties correctly, VCARB were struggling in Italy.
Yeah, it's kind of a shame, really. I think if they'd at least got that right, served the penalty correctly. I feel sorry for that mechanic because he'll be kicking himself, and he knew that, he shouldn't have done it, but he did it. Unfortunately, that has to be punished. But otherwise, it would have been I think a slightly more competitive race for VCarb. Unfortunately, as a sort of cruel feat of irony, obviously it was Ricardo's move or not paying attention to where Hulkenberg was that and then I think maybe that slightly what's the word? Just slightly put maybe Hulkenberg off kilter or something like that, and then Hulkenberg's obviously sent this ridiculous move down the inside of what was obviously going to close as a gap um, on Sonoda, and unfortunately it's meant that Sonoda's had to retire the car. I think maybe if I think there's maybe a world where Ricardo doesn't make that move, or doesn't do it as he did, leaves a little bit more space, and both cars are still in the race, and they might have had a much more competitive race, at the end of it at least. I think definitely serving the penalty incorrectly really, really, really hurt Ricardo, and he actually might have been maybe in sort of in the at least competing with Colapinto or someone like that, just slightly further up the order. But without that, unfortunately, it was he's sort of last of the non-lapped runners, which is still pretty good, but obviously, not really what you're expecting to be at what is ostensibly your home race. So yeah, I think it's a tricky weekend. So a little bit of an own goal from Ricardo there, but Sonoda unfortunately was an innocent bystander, and he just got well, yeah, he just got launched at.
Yeah, absolutely. And unfortunate for VCarb in, as you say, what is one of, essentially a home race being a largely Italian team. Um, but yeah, on to the next one for them. Alpine, however, Tom, suffered in Italy. They were absolutely waiting for this rapture to end. Pierre Gasly finishing behind his outgoing teammate, dropping back because things weren't feeling right. Surely it's got to be getting better for Alpine at some point.
Yeah, earlier in the season, there was reason for a little bit of optimism around Alpine, and we thought, you know what, they might be able to start moving up the constructor standings. We might see them pushing up towards sort of Haas and RB towards the end, and finishing in that best of the rest, just absolute distant fifth place, or sixth place rather. But that's not been the case in the last sort of 4 or 5 races. They've what little green shoots of recovery we saw seem to have now been completely trampled upon by other midfield teams. And they started 14th and finished 14th, 15th, finished 14th, 15th. that's not a great result. I know there's only one retirement in the race, and that was a guy, who was punted out very early on, but he started behind them anyway. So like it hasn't affected their race. They've done nothing. They've not been good. They've not been horrendous. Gasly was very much compromised with the first lap or the early collision. And obviously bashing wheels with Magnussen is not going to give anyone a smile on their face. Ocon made the one stop work as everyone else did. One stop did, but they really are in danger of finishing P9 in the championship now. I mean, I'll just look at the standings. So what they're 13 points, 6 points for Williams. They're not. It doesn't look like they're going to catch Haas now. They're 15 points behind Haas. 8 races to go. Are they going to double their points tally in the last 8 races? I very much doubt it. However, Williams now with 2 drivers looking like they might be able to fight for points. Could we see Williams make the mother of all comebacks and finish P8, which would be incredible for them? They knew they're going to be taking a step back this year anyway, but that would be incredible if they can do that and push up towards Alpine. But I mean, all I can really do to describe Alpine is just clown show. I think now they are inheriting that Ferrari meme just in general, just for the entire team. That's just Flavio, just hurry up and sell it. Just let us all put us out of our misery. Get Andretti in that car. I want 22 cars on the grid, but get Andretti to buy that thing and just get them out the door and out the way, because they're just taking up space. Talk about not adding anything to F1. What is Alpine adding to F1? Absolutely, Jack.
I was concerned for where that was going to go then. But yeah, absolutely. As you say, Alpine, if Ferrari were the clown strategists meme, like Alpine are surely mimes, for all of the noise they're making in Formula One as well. But finally, on to Sauber, Phil, who have been hung in a bad place all season. Bottas finishing P17 and Zhou behind Nico Hulkenberg in P19. Is there anything these two can do to keep the dream alive?
No, they're done. They're done until 2026, and Nico Hulkenberg and whoever he's going to have as his teammate, whether it's Valtteri and his naked body, whether it's insert pay driver here, whether it's somebody from Formula 2. Yeah, definitely not him either. It might be David at this point, but like it's pretty sad. I mean, they had everybody there. You had the guy who used to be at Ferrari, their new, I'm forgetting his name right now, but I forget a lot of names now. The old age is starting to kick in. Yeah, Benato, thank you. And then you had Peter Sauber there, and I'm like, wow, Peter Sauber actually making an appearance. And I'm like, this is depressing. I'm like, what happened to his team? A decade ago, they were competing for podiums, and Checo Perez was scoring them. So it tells you how far he's dropped off too. But now they're just there, and to be in that like mode where you're just the minority, or you're 40 or whatever, pick whatever minnow team, and they're going to be that way for another year or two, is not a very good look. Because I mean, Williams has 2 drivers next year that are strong, or especially one guy that's definitely strong, and then you have other team. I mean, Alpine is a rudderless ship, even with Jack Doohan coming in. Once you get past, like, I mean, outside of them, like, there's nothing. I mean, Audi is invested in this team. We'll see where that goes. I mean, it's going to be bad from here on, at least for a period of time into next year. So it's unfortunate for Valtteri Bottas, who is a race winner and has won many poles in Formula One, finished second in the World Championship. Zhou, whether you hate him, like him, whatever, Zhou has not been a complete waste of time. There's people that are on this grid, but he hasn't been for the most part. So we'll see what happens with him in his career, and who gets that second seat for 2025. That's really the only thing that we're waiting on at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you say, 10 years ago, Sauber was showing up, fighting for podiums. Checo Perez was on the up. Now Sauber show up to fulfill contract requirements, and that's about it. We don't expect Sauber to score in the points. We don't expect them really to have much screen time even, other than, if one of them maybe sets on fire. But yeah, I miss the old Sauber. I miss it. But on to more positive things. Our driver of the day. So Grid Talk voted overwhelmingly for Charles Leclerc. Owain, what else can be said? Is Charles Leclerc your driver of the day too?
I mean, I can't think of anyone else that has done a better job, really. By comparison, I think he probably did the best job on the day. Obviously got ahead where it needed to, and really well executed a strategy.
Yeah, definitely. Tom, how about yourself? Are you sticking with Charles Leclerc or are you going for an outlier?
Well, I'm going to go with someone different just to give someone else some love, and that has to be. I did the same thing in the Grid Talk Driver of the Day Slack as well. As the only person not to vote for Leclerc, I'm going to give some love to Franco Colapinto to come in with only a few days' notice. I know it's Monza, I know it's not that difficult, but it's the same for everyone. He's come in with very little experience. What, 8 races, 9 races, or race weekends in F2, and he's put the thing P12. I know he's benefited from a penalty in there as well, but it's still an incredible performance to be 12, 13 seconds off Alexander Albon in your debut weekend. And yeah, he's I think the worst he's done all weekend has put a couple of wheels in the gravel. The second savior, not Antonio Giovinazzi, the previous Charlie driver. The second savior, Kimi Antonelli, the second coming of Fangio, apparently heir apparent, is stuck it in the barrier in his second lap, and then you've got this guy coming in, also of Italian descent, at least anyway, and he's done an incredible job. So I'm going to say Franco Colapinto.
Charles Leclerc, Franco Colapinto. Phil, round it off for us. Are you giving it to Charles Leclerc? Are you giving it to Colapinto? Are you giving it to someone else?
Yeah, I'll give it to Charlie Claire. He did the job today, and it was the best of him. Like, we have multiple personalities of Charlie Claire, and this is the good one, the one where Ferrari has staked their whole entire Formula One future, in a sense, to him. If he drives like that and he is totally focused, he is a very tough driver. Is he as good as certain people? I don't know. But in terms of where, you get to that next level, after you get to, probably there's really two up there, and then you get to that next level. Charles Leclerc's got 7 Grand Prix wins. And in terms of recent Ferrari drivers, I mean, outside of like Alonso, Raikkonen, and Vettel, who are all world champions, I mean, he's up there. And now you're gonna have Sir Lewis Hamilton coming in new into the team. It'll be an interesting dynamic, but today was his day. He won the two most important races for himself and for Ferrari in the same season. So it's been no matter what really happens the rest of the year, it's been a good year for Charles Leclerc, and he was the driver today.
Absolutely, and it's performances like this that justify Ferrari's decision to keep Charles Leclerc for next season over Carlos Sainz. And yeah, absolutely, a well-deserved driver of the day, a very strong performance. Owain, what do you want to plug?
I want to plug Formula Talk. I have it on good authority that the support races today in F2 and F3 were absolutely scintillating. I mean, you can see from Tom's reaction there. Yeah, not just F3, but F2 as well, from what I'm reading. And if you want to hear all about that from the Grid Talk perspective, we have Formula Talk. That's hosted by our very own Sophia Richmond. And we'll give you a rundown of what's happening in Formula Talk, and sort of what the ramifications are for the championship, for some of the drivers who we've already seen this year, and we'll see next year. So make sure you catch that on all of the podcast platforms where you get Grid Talk.
How about you, Tom? Where can people find Monkey Seat?
You can find Monkey Seat anywhere you can find podcasts, really. Monkey Seat podcast, me and Carl just talking about F1 and being being uncut on that. We say we're not offensive at all. And I would also plug Formula Talk as well, because the support races. If you want to talk about partisan support in Italy today, in this weekend, we've in the support series, we had 2 Italian drivers in F3 fighting out for the championship until the final corner of the final lap. And you've also had in F2 2 Italian teams winning both races. So talk about partisan for the weekend. It's been a weekend to remember for Monza. So yeah, just follow us all.
Yeah, absolutely. And Phil, anything you want to plug? How about Grip Strip podcast?
Yeah, the Grip Strip podcast. You can find us anywhere. Like Tom said, find us anywhere you get podcasts. You can find myself and my co-host Joshua Fine talking about all things motorsports, not just Formula One, but NASCAR, IndyCar, and whatever else. We'll definitely talk about the support series because F3 has completed their season in the roundup. NFL starting this week, so we'll talk about that as well. You can find me at PG Mathew 28 on Twitter and JP Huffine on Twitter for Josh, and you can find us on YouTube at Grip Strip Podcast and philipgmatthew.com. And thank you as always, Ruby, for great work, and to Aiden, and always fun to be on with you guys, Tom and Owain.
Absolutely. A pleasure to have you on as well, Phil. And absolutely thanking the behind the scenes of Aidan on the production as well. Absolutely fantastic. If you want to find anything more from me, you can find me on the meta socials at Rube001. Or you can find my YouTube channel at Ruby Bryce. But Grid Talk is available on YouTube, where most episodes are recorded live, as well as Amazon Fire, Spotify, Apple Music, Verbal, and Pocket Casts. Just search Formula One Grid Talk for our huge back catalogue of shows with previews and reactions to the race results. Thank you to Jared Bradley for supporting on Patreon, and if you want to support the show further, why not sign up to our Patreon for exclusive content? Also, make sure you subscribe so you're the first to know when each new weekly episode is released. We'll be back soon with plenty more F1 content. Thank you very much for listening to the Grid Talk podcast presented by Bet Online, and goodbye. And we're going to jump straight into our post show. So first of all, I mentioned it like during the show, people have been talking. Our own Grid Talk community seemed divided as well, particularly on the sort of right outcome of this. And Tom, you're wearing McLaren overalls. Like, we've got to give you first.
Oh, how did they appear there?
But yeah, we've got to take it over to you because you didn't get a chance in the show. But what's your opinion on this sort of McLaren driver situation, and particularly with the championship at stake?
Well, I think McLaren have set their stall out with what they want to do, and the fact that they stuck to it, the calls of inverting Norris and Piastri at the end would have been an absolute mockery if they decided to do that. Then that would have been a crazy thing to do, and they would lose credibility if they decide to do that. And so I agree with them not inverting them at the end there. Lando still, I mean, he needs to gain 8 points a race on Max Verstappen to win the championship. He's gained 8 points this weekend. Now, the opportunity, he's not going to do that every weekend. The opportunity was there to get more. I get that. I get the frustration. But the problem is, as I said when I was talking in the race about George Russell's race, I think McLaren's brief was, you guys don't fight into turn one. You get alongside each other, you protect each other, and then after that, you can go for it. And Piastri's taken that to the point where he's got Charles Leclerc right behind him, and he's compromised Norris. And Norris said in an interview after the race, he said, they said, is there anything you could have done about it? He said, well, yeah, maybe I could have braked a few meters later, but then we would have crashed. Why is he putting Norris in that position when you're in a 1-2 on lap one? Follow him around, gain get a little bit of a gap to Leclerc. They've clearly got the best car, and then attack him lap one, lap two, lap three. I know he probably thought it's his only chance to win the race, but it just seemed like a crazy thing for him to do. Now, I don't blame Piastri for this. What Piastri doesn't give two hoots about Lando Norris's chances of winning the world championship unless the team tell him you must play the team game. He is not going to play the team game. Why should he? Why would he? I have nothing but respect for Oscar on that side of things. And yeah, if the positions were reversed, I would say exactly the same thing about Lando Norris. But the team need to be stronger. They need to say, look, this is the situation. Papaya rules. Yeah, fine. You race until you can race once the positions are secure. If we get to the end of the first stint, or 5 laps in, or 10 laps from the end, you've got a nice gap behind you, 4 or 5 seconds, and then you then are attacking. Go for it. Keep it clean, but go for it. Free to race, absolutely. But don't put your teammate in 3rd place, and then he sits behind Leclerc, compromising his entire first stint. He then has to box early to undercut, because we all know how difficult it is to overtake at Monza because of the DRS trains and everything. So he ends up having to completely compromise his first stint. And as a result, he's not up there fighting for that race win. And then Piastri didn't have the pace to close the thing out. I just genuinely think, now this might be my partisan support for Lando Norris coming out here as well, but I genuinely think if Piastri hadn't have attacked Norris on that first lap, if they've just gone through. Piastri looked like he was a quicker driver over the course of the weekend in race format, but without being in the dirty air and racing away, I think Lando Norris would have had the pace to close that victory out. And whether that meant that he would have been able to do a one stop, I'm not sure on that. But I just genuinely think that if he's given that opportunity, he would have done a better job than Piastri for the race. I just think he would have been in with a better chance. He would have been closer. He may have got the win on the last lap. He may have still been behind Leclerc. Who knows? But if things had been allowed to play out differently, I think it would have been different. But I just blame McLaren for that. I'm not blaming Oscar. I'm not blaming Lando. I just blame McLaren for that. And I know the narrative is going to be, oh look, another first lap loss for Lando Norris. But I'm not having that this time round. Their starts were great today. Both of them, they did a really good start, and it was only because Piastri did that bold but rude overtake on Lando, when Lando was probably thinking, we're not going to be fighting in the first lap. So I just think that's the reason. And yeah, at least he's on a track where it's very difficult to keep pole position into turn 1. He's kept pole position into turn 1. So that's something. But yeah, that's my rant over. I'm going to hand over to you guys to talk about something now, and I'm going to have a drink of water.
Yeah, absolutely. Phil, did you want to come in on this, the McLaren issue with not getting to talk about it during the show?
I mean, I get Tom's sentiment. And for the world championship purposes, yes, but there's a famous McLaren driver that once upon a time had a famous interview with another world champion about, we are racing drivers, and we are racing. And at that moment, Oscar Piastri is racing. In the end, he made a move. Lando didn't expect it, granted, but he made a move. It was a clean move, and they were 1-2 there. And yeah, sure. I mean, Lando, this week got a good start, but there's plenty of instances, obviously, where he didn't. And where were the points that he lost there? You're going to talk about the points today, and it's like, well, and he didn't, and Piastri didn't win the race. You have to give Ferrari credit when they actually get strategy right, because they get it wrong most of the time. The reality of the world is they got outrun because of a better strategy call. And whether that was Lando, whether that was Piastri, I don't think it really makes a difference. If you're going to come back to, they should have swapped them at the Italian Grand Prix, and that's the reason why Lando Norris somehow or another loses the world championship, then I have a hard time believing that. We can go back to multiple other examples, going all the way back to even Silverstone, that they didn't maximize points, or maximize Lando's race, or he didn't maximize his own race. In the grand scheme of things, I don't find that to be there's not a viable path really for Lando to win the world championship this year. The Constructors' Championship, absolutely, which is a 2-driver thing. And McLaren right now has the strongest driver lineup if they don't start going and eating each other, trying to go and cannibalize each other. So, I mean, you're going to win the constructors, which would be the first time since I think the late 90s or early 2000s, somewhere along there. For McLaren, that would be huge for them. Sets them up for 25, where you're going to have two guys that can compete for a world championship. Today, it's fun, whatever. It's going to be interesting. Lando was pouting the whole time. That's fine. In the grand scheme of things, he made a good start. Well, now it's time for you to make a good start for the rest of the season, and then you won't have to deal with Oscar Piastri probably, because you'll get away and you'll win the race. That's the way a lot of these other races will go. So, and if the other guy continues to have sixth or seventh or eighth place finishes or whatever, then maybe we could reevaluate later on this year. But I saw nothing wrong with what went on today.
Certainly a valid viewpoint as well. We'll take a question from Jared, who's been present in the chat for us. And I'll open this up to the floor. What happened to Sainz? He went longer on the first stint. Was the undercut so powerful that he couldn't recover? He seemed to have the superior.
I think it was with Sainz. Yeah, he did a better job in the first stint when they thought they were looking at the one stop originally, Ferrari, and then when the McLarens came in and with the undercut and looking at the wear on the Red Bulls, Red Bulls gave everyone a great a great bit of information there. So they really helped everyone else's race by starting on those hard tires. I think they then got a bit spooked into it and then were thinking, oh, then maybe go for the two stop. But then when McLaren's box, they were then back on the one stop idea. Now, Leclerc made that stop to try and protect against Norris. That was not a particularly clever thing to do, as it proved out. But in the end, it didn't matter. Sainz looked like he had at that point, I'm thinking Sainz could win this race because Leclerc's definitely the way he was coming into Parabolica, he was just looking after the front left and just letting it drift out wider than everyone else, taking pressure off. Going into turn one, he was taking a slightly wider line into turn one as well. His engineer was talking to him over the radio, saying, bit less pressure on this point, bit more on that point, and they would, from the point where they committed to that one stop, they 100% committed. We are doing this one stop, and they really did make it work. Sainz, I don't know if Sainz was getting the same information as that, but really it was just down to Leclerc's tire management. He just did a better job at the end of the day, and realistically, that's why we're seeing Sainz going to Williams and Leclerc being teammate to Lewis Hamilton next year, because that's the difference between them. I know that's unpopular. I love Carlos Sainz. He's my second favorite driver in F1, or third favorite. But still, I don't think he's got the overall pace that Leclerc has.
Yeah, absolutely. And, the pace that Leclerc had is ultimately the thing that's kept him, so far ahead down the road. And that's why he's the winner in the 2024 Italian Grand Prix, that we shall wrap up now. Thank you very much, everyone that stuck around for some questions. Thank you very much, all my panelists and Aidan as well in the production. We'll be back soon for more F1 content, and we'll see you then. Bye.